With Mafia, the old country, right around the corner, we'll head across the sea to Sicily in a story that predates the titles we've seen in the Mafia series thus far. Still, Suggestive Gaming, thought it would be a great time to revisit the Mafia storyline so far to catch up on where the series stands today. Now, I've already covered the Mafia series around 5 years ago here on the channel, but this time I'll be including the slightly adjusted story of the 2020 remake of the series' original title, Mafia Definitive Edition, as well as new 4K HDR footage. Yes, I replayed all of these games just so this video could look marginally better. Also, as a quick little bonus at the end of the video, I'll also be including the non-canon Mafia II DLCs, The Betrayal of Jimmy and Jimmy's Vendetta, which I skipped in my original attempt, so stick around until the very end. As a quick aside, like with most of the videos I make on this channel, I utilized various community-made mods while playing through the games for optimal visual quality. The mods I used are detailed in the description, so please check those out, and a huge thanks goes out to all of their original creators for their work in enhancing these games for all of us to play and enjoy. Now, without further ado, this is what you need to know about Mafia. Our story begins in April of 1920, in the Midwestern American city of Lost Heaven, with the wedding of mafioso Marco Morello. He and his best man, Ennio Salieri, work under Don Pepone, leader of the most powerful crime family in the city. By 1922, however, Don Pepone's two lieutenants turn on him, and he turns up dead shortly after. In his wake, Morello and Salieri split the Pepone family in two, becoming Dons of their own and divvying up the city to keep a shaky peace. As time moves on, however, this cohabitation slowly dissolves into rivalry. In 1930, we find taxi driver Thomas "Tommy" Angelo working long shifts in Lost Heaven just to make ends meet. One evening, however, his life suddenly changes when two members of the Salieri crime family, Paulie Lombardo and Sam Trapani, force him at gunpoint to help them escape an ambush by the rival Morello crime family. Luckily, Tommy's driving skills allow them to shake their pursuers and return safely to Don Ennio Salieri's restaurant. The Don sends Sam back to the cab with an envelope of cash as thanks for Tommy's help, and as he delivers it, Sam mentions there being more work available for Don Salieri. Tommy politely declines the offer, eager to just return to his simple life. Shortly after, however, Morello's men track Tommy down, believing him to be connected to Salieri, and proceed to beat him and his cab severely. Desperate, Tommy limps back to Salieri's restaurant, where the Don's men threaten his attackers and protect him. With the Don's permission, Tommy and Paulie destroy a few of the Morello family's cars as payback. When they return to Salieri's restaurant, the Don personally offers Tommy a place working for him. With the Great Depression leaving few opportunities for honest men to build their future, Tommy joins the Salieri family, beginning a new life of crime. Tommy quickly proves himself to Salieri, working up the family's ranks alongside Paulie and Sam to collect debts, run smuggling jobs, and carry out violent reprisals against the Morellos. In doing so, he forms close relationships with the family's loyal bartender Luigi Marino, his daughter Sarah, their stuttering but brilliant mechanic Ralphie Becco, and armorer Vincenzo Ricci, who provides Tommy with weapons for his jobs. By 1932, Tommy has become a trusted member of the family, so much so that Don Salieri entrusts him with sabotaging the race car of a driver backed by Don Morello, allowing Tommy to win the race for the Salieris instead, publicly embarrassing Morello. Tommy also begins a romantic entanglement with Sarah, Luigi the bartender's daughter. When a group of street thugs begin to harass her outside of her apartment, Tommy escorts her home and dispatches the punks. The next day, Don Salieri sends Tommy and Paulie to resolve the issue. They kill the gang's leader, Billy, during a pursuit and destroy their hideout, only to later discover that Billy was the son of city councilor Roberto Gigliotti, a powerful and corrupt Morello ally. This action places the family directly in the councilor's crosshairs, as well as further escalating the tension between the two families. Tommy is then forced to clean up his mess by taking out the sole person who witnessed Billy's death and survived. During this assignment, shockingly, Salieri also orders Tommy to kill Michelle, a friend of Sarah's working at one of the Don's brothels who has been leaking information to Morello. At the brothel, Tommy learns that Michelle was only cooperating with Morello to pay for her brother's medical bills. Tommy, at Sam's request, disobeys his boss and secretly spares her life, sending her out of town and warning her to never return. Sam later repays this favor by rescuing Tommy and killing the surviving witness to Billy's murder. However, Tommy's loyalty is tested again later that year. Shortly after a police ambush during one of the family's bootlegging operations, Don Salieri orders the death of his longtime consigliere, or right-hand man, Frank Coletti, for secretly providing law enforcement with evidence of the family's financial crimes. When Tommy finds Frank at the airport, preparing to leave the country, he learns that Coletti turned informant to protect his wife and daughter from Morello, as well as to finally escape the mafia life to live in peace. Tommy allows Frank and his family to escape to Europe in exchange for the evidence that he planned to turn over to the feds, once again defying Salieri's orders. Tommy covers his tracks by faking Frank and his family's deaths. Tommy continues his work with Salieri over the next year, including stealing more evidence from a prosecutor working with Morello to take down the family. Paulie also works to steal the business of a Kentucky whiskey dealer from Morello, furthering the financial blows back and forth between the warring Dons. By 1935, tensions between Salieri and Morello erupt into an all-out open war after Don Salieri survives a failed assassination attempt from the Morellos, discovering that the Don's driver, Carlo, was secretly working with the rival family. Tommy, Paulie, and Sam are then tasked with weakening Morello's empire, preparing the Don for a final strike. They proceed to assassinate Morello's allies, Counselor Galoti and the Don's brother, a lucky bastard named Sergio, who nearly escapes his fate after multiple failed attempts. Eventually, the Salieri family make their final strike, attacking Don Morello himself before chasing him as he attempts to flee Lost Heaven by plane. Tommy and his crew ambush Morello's plane during the escape, forcing it to crash land as they follow it. In the wreckage of the plane, Tommy finds the Don and eliminates him, finally bringing an end to the Morello family's leader. With Don Morello gone, Salieri consolidates power and gains complete control over Lost Heaven's criminal underworld. Part of this plan involves tasking Tommy with assassinating a gubernatorial candidate vowing to stop organized crime. Through all of it, however, Tommy, now married to Sarah and the father of a young daughter, grows more and more uneasy about the life that he's chosen. In 1938, Paulie approaches Tommy and Sam with a proposal: rob the Lost Heaven Bank behind Salieri's back. Tommy initially refuses to do anything without permission, but when the group discover that supposed smuggled diamonds they were tasked with stealing for Salieri were actually heroin, Tommy realizes that the Don has been keeping secrets of his own. Feeling cheated and betrayed, especially considering Salieri had always condemned drugs, Tommy agrees to the heist, finally seeing a way to give his family a safe life. The Moonlight Bank job is a success, and Tommy and Paulie get away with the score, agreeing to lay low separately. However, the next day, when Tommy arrives at Paulie's apartment to collect his share, he shockingly finds his friend murdered and the money missing. The phone rings, and Tommy answers to hear Sam on the other end, frantically searching for Paulie. Tommy gives him the bad news, and the pair agree to meet at the Lost Heaven Art Gallery. At the gallery, however, Tommy is met at gunpoint by Salieri's men, and Sam arrives to reveal the truth. Salieri discovered the heist, as well as Frank and Michelle's survival, and ordered both Tommy and Paulie killed. Sam betrayed Paulie and lured Tommy into a trap, pledging his loyalty to his family over his friends. A brutal gunfight then erupts as Tommy fights through Sam's men, eventually confronting Sam himself. Sam, mortally wounded, warns Tommy that Salieri will never stop looking for him, and that he'll spend the rest of his life in fear. Nonetheless, Tommy then kills his former friend before escaping. Shortly after, Tommy flees Lost Heaven with Sarah and their daughter. However, after some time on the run, Tommy finally meets with Lost Heaven police detective John Norman and offers to testify against Salieri in exchange for his family's safety. With Tommy's cooperation, law enforcement arrests Salieri and his entire organization. Salieri is subsequently sentenced to life in prison. Sometime later, Tommy and his family are relocated to the East Coast, in Empire Bay, under new identities, hoping for a fresh start. The Angelos soon learn, however, that they'll never shake the feeling of Salieri's grip around their throats. Shortly after Tommy Angelo's betrayal of the Salieri crime family, a low-level mobster named Marco Rossetto arrives in Lost Heaven to reconnect with his uncle Vincenzo, the family's now former firearms supplier. Vincenzo warns Marco that the authorities are closing in fast and urges him to flee to Empire City, which is likely another name for Empire Bay, to continue the family's work from afar. Upon arriving in Empire City, Marco locates Henry Tomasino, a trusted associate of his uncle. Marco asks Henry for help in hunting down Tommy Angelo. After proving his loyalty and capability through several dangerous jobs, including protecting Henry from an ambush, Henry agrees to introduce Marco to Don Carlo Falcone, head of the powerful Falcone crime family. Don Falcone sees potential in Marco and offers him work to prove his worth. One such assignment involves robbing a jewelry store owned by the rival Moretti family. Marco executes the job successfully, but narrowly evades the police. Despite his success, Falcone continues to demand more and more from him. During a later mission, however, Marco is ambushed by the authorities, set up by someone within the organization, and ends up incarcerated. While in prison, Marco aligns himself with Marcus, the leader of the Baby Dolls prison gang. By smuggling heroin across rival-controlled blocks, Marco earns Marcus's favor and is able to obtain a counterfeit temporary leave order. Taking advantage of his brief freedom, Marco contacts Falcone and requests help in obtaining a permanent release. Falcone agrees, but only if Marco carries out one last high-risk task: bomb a casino owned by Don Frank Vinci, a powerful rival of the family. Marco plants the bomb and narrowly escapes before the casino explodes. Falcone then uses his influence to secure Marco's release from prison and begins assigning him higher-level tasks. During one mission, Marco learns that the Falcone family has captured Mauricio, an associate of the Vinci family. Marco interrogates Mauricio, who reveals that Frank Vinci is collaborating with the Lost Heaven police and may know where Tommy Angelo is being hidden. Before Marco can act on this intel, however, Vinci's men storm the safe house to rescue Mauricio, but Marco is able to kill them all and escape. When he shares the news with Falcone, the Don orders him to assassinate Frank Vinci to eliminate any remaining opposition. At this point, Vinci's fate is left in Marco's hands, but ultimately, he refuses, realizing that Vinci may be his only chance to finally locate Tommy Angelo. Despite threats from Falcone, Marco arranges a meeting with Don Vinci. Vinci claims that he knows Tommy's whereabouts and sends Marco to a cemetery in Empire City. Marco follows the lead, but upon arrival, he quickly realizes that it was a trap. There's no sign of Tommy. As he attempts to flee, Marco is ambushed by police forces and quickly gunned down in a brutal shootout. In the end, Marco dies without achieving his vengeance, and the Salieri family's search for Tommy Angelo comes to a tragic and fruitless end. At least for now. In 1943, we find 18-year-old Sicilian-born Vito Scaletta living in Empire Bay, committing petty crimes with his lifelong best friend, Joe Barbaro, to get by. When the pair are caught by police during a botched robbery, Joe manages to escape while Vito is arrested. Rather than serve time in prison, Vito is given the choice to enlist in the US Army. He accepts and ships out to his birth country of Sicily as part of the Allied invasion of World War II. During a mission in the Sicilian town of San Celeste, Vito sees firsthand the power of the Mafia, when local boss Don Callo convinces the Italian soldiers to lay down their arms. This display of respect and authority leaves a lasting impression on Vito, leaving him longing for similar power of his own. 2 years later, in 1945, Vito is wounded in battle and granted a month-long medical leave to return home to Empire Bay. There, he reunites with Joe Barbaro, who helps him work with a forger named Giuseppe to secure discharge papers that permanently free him from army service. While working to get his freedom secured, Vito visits his mother and sister Francesca, only to learn that his late father, who worked grueling hours at the docks under Derek Pappalardo before drowning on the job, left behind a $2,000 debt to a loan shark who is now threatening the family. After starting to get back into his old habits with Joe, Vito follows his family's wishes and meets with Derek at the docks to ask for some honest work. He tries stacking crates for a bit, but quickly quits when he realizes how little it pays despite the grueling work. After learning of Vito's connection to Joe, Derek offers him a more lucrative alternative, shaking down dock workers, which Vito does, earning a taste of fast, though unethical, cash. Through Derek and Joe, Vito meets Henry Tomasito of the Clementi crime family, who offers him and Joe jobs stealing government gas stamps and selling them off before they expire. When the job goes off without a hitch, Henry gives them more work, including robbing a jewelry store. During the heist, however, a rival gang led by Brian O'Neill interrupts and the police arrive amidst the chaos. Vito and Joe escape with the jewels, while O'Neill and his crew are arrested, earning Vito and Joe more credibility with Henry. Soon after, Henry tasks them with killing a businessman named Sidney Penn, who has stopped paying Don Clementi. Vito and Joe carry out the hit at Penn's distillery, despite Henry getting hit by gunfire in the process, and Vito finally earns enough money to pay off his father's debt, handing the cash over to Francesca to settle things with the loan shark. However, Vito's luck doesn't last. He's soon arrested for his part in the stolen gas stamps operation and placed on trial. When Joe learns of Vito's arrest, he scrambles to clear his friend's name. He contacts Luca Guarino, one of Clementi's top enforcers, who orders Joe to silence the gas station attendant who testified against Vito. Joe does so, but discovers that the real threat is a federal witness named Richie Mazzio, who could take down the entire Clementi family. Joe hunts down and kills Mazzio, believing that Vito will go free now that there's no witnesses to testify against him. Unfortunately, Joe's efforts are in vain, as Vito is still convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Furious, Joe storms Freddy's bar to confront Luca, but the meeting doesn't go as he planned, as it ends with Luca ordering a hit on Joe. Luckily, he's warned by Henry Tomasino, and Joe flees Empire Bay, forced to live his life underground. Meanwhile, Vito is forced to adapt to prison life. He quickly finds himself at odds with Brian O'Neill yet again, holding a grudge for his arrest, causing Vito to seek protection from Leo Galanti, longtime consigliere to the Vinci crime family. Leo, who's serving his own prison sentence for fixing boxing fights, proceeds to work with Vito, teaching him how to fight and navigate mafia politics on the inside. During a visit from his sister, Francesca gives Vito good news and bad news. She's getting married, but their mother has fallen ill, and she's only getting worse. Vito instructs her to visit Joe and collect some money that he's holding to get her the best doctor that she can find. Unfortunately, their mother passes during this very visit. Instead of Vito's money going towards a doctor, it instead goes towards his mother's funeral. Eventually, with Leo's backing, Vito defeats and kills O'Neill in a prison brawl, removing his biggest threat behind bars. Now safe, Vito spends the rest of his sentence comfortably under Leo's wing, learning the inner workings of Empire Bay's 3 crime families, led by Dons Alberto Clemente, Carlo Falcone, and Frank Vinci. By the year 1950, Joe finally resurfaces in Empire Bay, masterfully disguised and working for the Falcone crime family under underboss Eddie Scarpa. Still carrying a target on his back from Luca Guarino and the Clementi family, Joe gains favor by helping Falcone's men. He eventually learns that Eddie's associate Rocco is plotting to assassinate Don Carlo Falcone. Joe also learns the Clementi family helped orchestrate Vito's arrest years earlier, making Joe even more determined to destroy them entirely. During a meeting at the Garden of Eden Club, Rocco makes his move, but Joe and Eddie intervene, kill him, and save Falcone's life. Grateful, Falcone arranges for Joe to meet Luca Guarino and call off the hit, and Joe gleefully greets Luca with a middle finger during their reunion. The next year, in 1951, Vito is released from prison early thanks to Leo's influence and reunites with Joe. Joe introduces Vito to Eddie Scarpa, who brings him in to work for the Falcone family. After a few jobs for the family, Vito is tasked with finally eliminating Luca Guarino after Luca kidnaps 3 of Falcone's men. Vito successfully takes out Luca, freeing his captives and earning the trust of Don Falcone, who later makes him and Joe official made men. Their next big assignment is to kill Don Clementi himself. Vito and Joe infiltrate a meeting at the Empire Arms Hotel, just masterfully disguised as cleaners. The pair secretly plant a bomb, but Clemente survives the explosion. After a frantic chase out into the streets, Joe guns Clementi down, effectively dissolving the Clementi family with the pull of his trigger. Despite the mission's success, Joe's protege, a young man named Marty, is killed, sending Joe down a dark spiral of alcoholism and violence. Sometime later, Henry Tomasino, now left without a family, approaches Vito for work. He introduces him to Eddie Scarpa, who allows Henry to join the Falcones if he proves himself first, by killing Leo Galante to weaken the Vinci family. Not wanting his old friend to die needlessly, Vito gets to Leo first and warns him. Leo then cuts a deal with Henry to fake his death, or escapes before Henry can even find him. Vito then drives Leo to the train station, where he watches his former mentor leave Empire Bay for someplace warm. Vito continues to enjoy his new life of wealth, taking a detour to beat some senses into his brother-in-law after he lays a hand on Francesca and skips out on her. Unfortunately, one night the remnants of O'Neill's gang, now led by the late Brian's cousin, Mickey Desmond, torch his house while he sleeps. Vito escapes with his life and is able to take Mickey's in revenge, but loses everything he's built thus far, including all of his savings. Left desperate for cash, Vito agrees to join Joe and Henry in a heroin deal despite his, as well as the greater Mafia Commission's, objections to the drug trade. The group then proceed to borrow money from a predatory loan shark named Bruno Levine to purchase the drugs from the Empire Bay Triads. Despite some opposition, the trio are able to leave with the drugs to sell them on the street. The deal is barely complete when Falcone learns of it and demands a cut, further gutting their profits. Joe and Vito agree to meet with Henry in Lincoln Park, but when they arrive, they're forced to watch as Triads hack Henry to death and steal all of the money. Joe and Vito chase the killers to the Red Dragon restaurant and fight through waves of Triads to confront their enforcer, Zi Young Woo, who claims that Henry was a federal informant. Joe refuses to believe it and executes Wong, sparking a full-scale war between the Mafia and the Triads. Still owing Bruno money, Vito takes whatever work he can find. He and Joe then accept a contract from Eddie for a family from another city to kill a former Mafia rat now living quietly in Empire Bay. Meanwhile, in Empire Bay, Tommy Angelo walks his daughter down the aisle at her wedding, delivering a speech to the reception, including his longtime wife Sarah, about how his life has taught him the importance of family. Sometime later, Tommy waters the lawn in his front yard, when two men he doesn't know pull up to his house, Vito Scaletta and Joe Barbaro. As they approach Tommy, they address him as Mr. Angelo. Hearing a name that he hasn't heard in a long while, Tommy realizes that his time is up and turns to accept his fate. Vito then delivers a final message. Mr. Salieri sends his regards, before Joe shoots him, finally paying back Tommy's betrayal of Don Salieri years before. Tommy's family rush out of the house, and he promises them that they're finally safe with his final breath. As Tommy Angelo dies, his words from his wedding speech echo that family is forever. Sometime later, Vito takes a job at the docks from Derek Pappalardo, but quickly learns from the workers that it was Derek who was responsible for his father's death. Enraged, Vito kills Derek and his men and steals his cash to pay Bruno back. Shortly after, Vito discovers Joe has been abducted by the Vinci crime family for questioning. He storms Vinci's compound and rescues Joe before returning to Bruno to finally pay off his debt. As he does so, however, Vito realizes that Bruno is the very same loan shark who once preyed on his late father, a bitter reminder that some cycles never end. The next day, Vito is surprisingly contacted by a newly returning Leo Galante and is scolded for igniting the war with the Triads. Leo then offers him one way out, by killing Don Falcone, whose recklessness threatens all of the Mafia families. With no other choice, Vito reluctantly agrees, with Leo promising him protection from the Triads in return. Vito then heads to the nearby observatory and planetarium to eliminate Falcone. There, he is ambushed and held at gunpoint by none other than his own best friend, Joe Barbaro. Falcone reveals that he offered Joe a powerful position in exchange for his cooperation in taking down Vito. For a moment, it seems as if Joe might take the deal, but he stays loyal and helps Vito kill Don Falcone before the pair walk out together. Outside, Leo arrives with his men. Vito is placed in Leo's car while Joe is directed to another. As the cars drive off in separate directions, Leo tells Vito that the protection deal only covered him. Vito then watches as Joe's car veers down a separate street. He's left to look out the window in panic, realizing that while he may have just saved his own life, it may have been at the cost of his lifelong best friends. In 1968, in the southern U.S. city of New Bordeaux, U.S. Army veteran Lincoln Clay returns home from the Vietnam War. Orphaned as a child, Lincoln was raised in St. Michelle's orphanage until he was adopted by Sammy Robinson, the leader of the Black Mob in the Delray Hollow neighborhood. Alongside Sammy and his adoptive brother Ellis, Lincoln found a sense of family, with Father James Ballard serving as a moral compass while helping raise him at the orphanage. When Lincoln reunites with Ellis upon his return from the war, the pair drive to Sammy's bar to see their adoptive father as well as Father James. Lincoln quickly learns that Sammy's organization is in dire straits. Haitian gangs have been cutting into his lottery operations, and worse, Sammy owes a significant debt to Sal Marcano, the ruthless don of the Italian mob that controls most of New Bordeaux. To make up for the lost money, Sal invites Lincoln to the exclusive country club and offers him a way out, work directly for the Marcano family, and eventually take over the Hollow. Lincoln refuses out of loyalty to Sammy, but agrees to help settle the debt by participating in an ambitious plan hatched by the Don's son, Georgie Marcano, robbing the Federal Reserve during the city's Mardi Gras celebration. The crew for the heist includes Lincoln, Ellis, Georgie, and Irish mobster Danny Burke, whose father, Thomas Burke, recently lost control of the Point Verdun district to Sal's enforcer, Roman the Butcher Barbieri. The heist is masterfully planned, using stolen guard uniforms, Inside help and a boat to sneak a drill into position through the city's canals, the crew manages to breach the reserve vault and steal millions. After a chaotic escape through the streets during Mardi Gras, they return to Sammy's bar to celebrate their success. However, the celebration is short-lived. Sal and Georgie arrive with their men, and in a shocking betrayal, Georgie shoots Lincoln in the head. As Lincoln lies bleeding, he's forced to watch helplessly as Ellis, Danny, and finally Sammy are murdered in front of him. The Marcanos then torch the bar, leaving with the entire sum of stolen cash, believing Lincoln to be dead among the flames. Unbeknownst to them, however, the bullet didn't kill Lincoln. Father James luckily arrives and discovers him, rescuing him from the burning bar and taking him back to the church to nurse him back to health. When Lincoln eventually recovers, he's contacted by John Donovan, his former CIA handler from Vietnam. Donovan, aware of the Marcano family's empire and its corruption, agrees to help Lincoln dismantle them piece by piece. However, Donovan often remarks on government corruption and cryptic references to blowing open something bigger. His wariness towards the Mafia Commission doesn't seem to be just about Sal, but perhaps something much, much deeper. Lincoln's first target is the Haitian gang that betrayed Sammy. He tracks them down and discovers that Sal Marcano had handed control of the Hollow over to the Dixie Mafia, a white supremacist organization, to flood it with heroin. Realizing the only way to topple Sal is to take away his sources of power and money, Lincoln begins recruiting allies to seize territory from the Marcanos. Lincoln approaches 3 powerful crime bosses in New Bordeaux. First, Cassandra, the Haitian queenpin who controls a voodoo shop and an extensive reefer operation. After a tense confrontation, Lincoln convinces her to join forces, promising her full control of the Hollow once he eliminates Sal's Dixie Mafia enforcer, Richie Doucet, a sadistic murderer who kidnaps and hunts black teenagers for sport. Lincoln dismantles Richie's operations, frees women trapped in his brothels, and eventually corners him in the derelict Baron Saturday's Fun Park. He kills Richie and publicly hangs his body from a Ferris wheel, sending a clear message to the Dixie Mafia and Sal's organization. Next, Thomas Burke, still bitter over losing Point Verdun, initially rejects Lincoln's offer. Lincoln forcibly tests Burke's spirit by dragging him on a dangerous drive, until the drunken Irishman proves he's still capable. Burke agrees to help in exchange for vengeance on Barbieri. Lincoln disrupts Barbieri's rackets, the Sweetwater Distillery and the Ribot Slaughterhouse, before luring him out for a brutal confrontation. Lincoln and Burke's daughter, Nikki, assist in killing Barbieri, leaving his broken body to rot in a car trunk in the Mississippi River. Burke then takes back control of Point Verdun, but warns Lincoln that his enemies won't stop until they're all dead. Last, but certainly not least, Vito Scaletta, the former Empire Bay mobster, has been living in New Bordeaux under Sal's thumb ever since Leo Galante saved him from certain death years prior. Sal cut Vito out of the Marcanos' profits and has been sabotaging his businesses to slowly weaken it. Lincoln saves Vito from a Marcano hit squad and earns his loyalty by restoring his control over his rackets. Vito, still haunted by the uncertain fate of Joe Barbaro, views Lincoln as a kindred spirit and pledges his resources to help in the war. As Lincoln liberates districts and assigns them to either Cassandra, Burke, or Vito, he must balance their loyalty. If Lincoln favors one underboss too heavily, the others grow resentful. Burke becomes dangerously unhinged, threatening to pull out entirely, while Cassandra, always suspicious, begins moving assets without Lincoln's knowledge. Even Vito, loyal as he is, warns Lincoln not to make the same mistakes as Sal Marcano. Nonetheless, Lincoln's empire grows district by district as he systematically dismantles Sal Marcano's empire. While destroying Sal's operation, Lincoln is drawn into a few other minor events as well. In Sinclair Parish, Lincoln aids a civil rights group fighting the area's openly racist sheriff, Slim Beaumont. Lincoln collects evidence of Slim's crimes, leading to the sheriff's arrest and eventual federal prosecution. Lincoln also uncovers a drug-fueled apocalyptic cult operating out of the ruins of Sammy's bar. The cult seeks to birth the seed to rule humanity after an impending apocalypse. Lincoln eradicates their leadership and disbands the cult, rebuilding the bar better than ever in Sammy's memory. Most importantly, and perhaps most ridiculously, Agent Donovan receives intelligence that rogue CIA agent Connor Aldridge has stolen a nuclear warhead and fled to an island off the coast of Mexico. Lincoln and Donovan infiltrate the island, wipe out Aldridge's mercenaries, and retrieve the warhead for the US government. Donovan personally kills Aldridge before they return to New Bordeaux. As the city bows to his power, Lincoln begins to question whether he's avenging his family or simply replacing Sal as the new tyrant. He visits Father James more often, but the priest finds it harder and harder to reach the man Lincoln used to be. With Sal's lieutenants dead and his empire in ruins, Lincoln learns that Marcano has tied up all of his remaining money in the construction of a lavish casino, hoping to go legitimate to escape the criminal life. Lincoln storms the casino construction site, facing waves of Marcano's men. Georgie Marcano makes his last stand, but Lincoln guns him down in a bloody shootout, finally avenging the attempt on his life. Lincoln then ascends to the casino's penthouse and confronts Sal Marcano. The two share a tense drink, as Sal admits that he doesn't regret killing Lincoln's family, only that Lincoln survived. Lincoln is then given the choice to kill Sal himself or leave him to jump out the window to escape his fate. Either way, Sal dies, and Lincoln finally avenges Sammy, Ellis, and Danny. Outside the casino, Lincoln is met by Leo Galante, who represents the Greater Mafia Commission. Leo warns Lincoln that the Commission has been watching and fears that he may come after them next. Lincoln assures Leo that his crusade is now over. Leo respects Lincoln's word and permits him to continue running New Bordeaux's criminal empire, so long as he pays the Mafia Commission their cut. Leo then exits in his car, driven by an employee of his who bears a striking resemblance to Joe Barbaro. Lincoln then meets Father James and Agent Donovan in the church. James urges him to leave crime behind, while Donovan believes that Lincoln should rule New Bordeaux alone. Donovan departs, leaving Lincoln to choose his future. In one option, Lincoln calls a meeting with his underbosses, declares himself the sole leader, and executes them. However, when he leaves in his car, a bomb planted by Father James explodes, instantly killing him. James, believing Lincoln would only become another Sal Marcano, couldn't bear to watch it happen. In another option, Lincoln continues to rule the city with Cassandra, Burke, and Vito at his side. He uses his power and wealth to rebuild New Bordeaux and fund charities, though his vices begin to consume him. Father James, disheartened, cuts all ties with Lincoln Clay. Finally, Lincoln can heed Father James's advice and instead leave New Bordeaux behind entirely. He drifts across the country for years, taking odd jobs, but never truly finding a place that he can call home. Regardless of Lincoln Clay's fate, his actions spark a lengthy FBI investigation led by Agent Jonathan McGuire. Years later, in 1971, the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence calls a hearing with John Donovan to uncover the truth behind Lincoln Clay's actions and Donovan's involvement in them. At the end of the hearing, Donovan sidetracks the discussion by asking the chairman of the committee, Senator Richard Blake, where he was when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Despite Blake failing to see any relevance in the question, Donovan proceeds to pull out a pistol and aims it directly at the senator. Donovan then reveals that he had long ago learned that Sal Marcano was part of a group of conspirators that planned the assassination of the president. This, as it turns out, was Donovan's entire driving force to help Lincoln take down the Marcano family. Once Sal was dead, Donovan was able to recover the Don's files. When he looked through them, he found Blake's name several times, implicating the senator in the conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. Donovan then looks to the cameras, as well as those in the courtroom, and warns that he's not finishing his work with Senator Blake, but rather just getting started. He then executes the senator in his seat, laughing as he walks out of the courtroom, leaving the future of his crusade currently unknown and unwritten. This brings us to the end of the Mafia story so far, but there's still a couple of stories to tell. Those of Jimmy, the star of a pair of non-canon, arcade-like DLCs for Mafia II. So, let's go over those as well. In 1950s Empire Bay, Jimmy is the go-to guy for the criminal underworld, a cleaner known for finishing jobs for the various crime families, building his reputation on precision and discretion. His associate Sal Gravina tasks him with dismantling the operations of the Bombers and the Empire Bay Triads, while another, named Tam Brody, wants Triad bootlegging and smuggling shut down. Jimmy executes each hit ruthlessly, but as he goes to collect his pay, he soon learns that Gravina and Brody have other plans. He's betrayed, set up, arrested on false charges, and sentenced to 15 years behind bars. While incarcerated, however, Jimmy orchestrates a brutal prison riot as a distraction to escape Hartman Federal Penitentiary. He then returns to Empire Bay with one goal: revenge. He proceeds to methodically tear down Gravina's empire, sabotaging smuggling routes, stealing assets, assassinating key lieutenants, before confronting Sal Gravina himself and killing him at a lighthouse. Meanwhile, Jimmy likewise dismantles Brody's Irish gang, burning their headquarters, rescuing businesses forced to pay protection, and eliminating lieutenants as well as Brody himself at Empire Bay Forge. With both crime lords dead, Jimmy unearths the true mastermind, corrupt Judge Hillwood, who'd secretly orchestrated Jimmy's setup. Jimmy storms Hillwood's mansion, kills all of the guards in his way, before finding and eliminating the judge himself. He then leaves, burning the estate to the ground and bringing an end to Jimmy's vendetta. This also brings us to the end of the entire Mafia saga thus far, at least until we take a trip back to where it all began in the old country. In 1900 Sicily, we'll meet another young hopeful, Enzo Favara, as he fights to climb the ranks of the Teresi crime family. From the streets of Lost Heaven to Empire Bay, down to the bayou of New Bordeaux, and now all the way across the ocean to Sicily, the reach of Mafia is vast. But even greater is the Mafia series' legacy on the gaming landscape over the past 2 decades. So, raise your finest glass of Italian wine as we toast to the legacy's continued success. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this full breakdown, please do me a solid and hit that like button. Really helps out the channel. If you're new here and want more complete story recaps like this one, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. Catfish? If you want to go a step further and officially join the family, consider supporting Suggestive Gaming on Patreon or becoming a channel member to become a made man. You'll get early access to videos, behind-the-scene updates, and other exclusive perks. And, more importantly, you'll be keeping the light on and the cats fed here at the SG Studio, which is just my attic. I've covered plenty of other franchises in this same format, so if you're hungry for more, YouTube thinks you'd like the one on screen now, so who are you to argue, huh? Who are you to argue with the almighty algorithm? Click it. As always, I've been Suggestive Gaming, and now you're in the know.